here. We out here on this. Y'all, we out here on some nut shit. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is.
Wait, time out. I don't have a good song on. I don't even have a song on.
So I just saw a tweet that is having me pick. I have to keep. It gives me 4 albums, and I have to keep one of them. The albums being Taboo, funny enough, the album I'm going to talk about today. Care for Me by Saba, Astroworld by Travis Scott, and then The Never Story by J.I.D. And honestly, I'm not confident in any pick I have. I feel like I kind of want to just go with Taboo, just because, well, you'll see why as I talk about it today on this episode. But damn, man, that's a hard ass pick. Astroworld has some fucking hits on it too, and it's my favorite Travis project. That Care for Me. If you guys don't know who Saba is, or have ever heard of Saba, or have never heard of his album Care for Me, go listen to that album. That album is absolutely incredible. I don't talk about that album enough. I don't even listen to that album enough, because it's just, you kind of have to be in a specific mood to listen to get like the most out of it. But definitely go listen to that Care for Me by Saba album. It's fantastic. Alright, but anyway, not talking about other albums, let's just get to it. So, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Bittersweet Taste podcast. I am really, really excited to record this podcast because I have the benefit of getting to talk to you guys about one of my favorite albums of all time, and that is, like I said, Taboo by Denzel Curry. This episode is it's kind of a hybrid episode. I'm going to use this kind of like a hybrid episode because it's part Gods of the Genre series that I started with my episode on maybe like a month ago on Sabrina Claudio on her Truth Is album. And then it's also going to be parts of a new series. There's going to be the start of a new series that I'm calling Play This at My Funeral, which is basically just a series where I talk about music or albums that I like so much that I would want them to be played at my funeral when I die. And more for that series. That's not going to really just be like, it's just kind of like albums that I like talking about. It's not necessarily going to be like albums that I hold, or that like a lot of people hold to like a high regard, or are critically acclaimed, or are like necessarily like the best in their genre, like I have been doing for like the Gods of the Genre series. But it's more just music that I just really like, and that I really want to talk about. And I'll probably do a lot of those because, I mean, you know, one thing I just love to do is just talk about music. So if I can find a new series, or if I can make a new series that just lets me, you know, just talk about shit that I like to listen to, I'm gonna do it a lot. So definitely look out for more of those episodes. So anyway, back to Taboo. Not only is this one of my favorite albums ever, it also, and the reason why this is kind of like a hybrid episode, is because it also doubles as a great example of a concept album, or at least one great example of a concept album. There are 100,000 million different ways to do a concept album, or concepts you can do with an album, but I think this is a really good example of it. I think it's a really clear example of it. It's really easy to articulate, which is also why I picked it and why I think it's a good example of it. And of course we'll get to that. And yeah, so that's kind of why I'm talking. That's why the format of this episode is going to be kind of different, just because I'm kind of going to be looking at like the album and the songs in like 2 different lights, just kind of like what's the concept and how do the songs play to the concept, and then also, you know, like I like this song, why do I like this song? So it's a little bit of both. So yeah. Starting off with Denzel Curry as an artist, in some ways, or at least the way I see him, in some ways, he is kind of a music industry anomaly, and by that, I'm mostly referring to his career path up to where he is today in 2020. Most of you guys, I'm assuming that most of you guys and the general public was probably introduced, like me, to Denzel Curry through his highly, highly, highly memed and copied and posted song called Ultimate, which I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. Which was released in actually mid-2015, which makes me feel old because I feel like that meme was, you know, the decade old at this point. But it only actually started catching or gaining traction in early 2016, thanks in very large part to, you know, Vine. Vine was very popular in 2016, as you guys remember. And it was probably at its peak, or at least in its, I guess, peak in terms of volume. Like, it was just people were pumping out content on Vine in 2016. So you would see this this meme would pop every once in a while. But and I mean, like, just the general growth of internet meme culture in general hit a really high point in 2016 around this time, which definitely helped, Denzel Curry and this song get a lot of traction. I'm sure most people who are around my age would still recognize the song despite not knowing it's by Denzel Curry, or even that Denzel Curry exists. All they know is that, it's just a song that they've heard. They don't know anything of it other than just like I don't even know how long it played. I guess like the 6 seconds, if we're talking about Vines, that you heard of the song. It's actually kind of insane to me, and this is really where the anomaly comes from, that Denzel Curry was able to quote unquote survive being like this larger than music meme and become, and eventually become one of the most highly regarded artists in his class, even though I still think he's a good bit underrated. He's still, he's one, I don't want to call it, he's not underground anymore by any means. But I still think he's highly regarded enough. Like he's somewhat of a household name. If you follow music in general, you probably have heard of him at this point, or hip hop in general, you've definitely heard of him at this point. But it's just kind of crazy to me that, that doesn't, in 2016 or, 2015, 2016, it's interesting that he was able to, I say survive kind of in like a tongue-in-cheek way, because I mean, like, obviously he was going to keep making music and it's probably going to be good, but, being a joke on the internet in 2016 might not have always ended pretty well for you, and especially if you're not like making mainstream music like Denzel Curry is, or Denzel Curry was, it's hard to like break into the mainstream after that. But, and this was, keep in mind, this was years before making meme music was a normal industry practice. And I will talk about how, how, at least from what I see, how artists and labels promoting music through memes is just become insanely prominent, insanely cheesy in this day, like, in the past few years. I'll talk about that at a separate podcast, so we'll save that for then. But a little bit more background on Denzel Curry himself. He was raised in South Florida, which he references on many songs. Not so many on this album, but on his following album, Zoo, he references a lot of that's a South Florida-esque, that's kind of like a concept album in and of its own, but again, I'll say that for a separate episode. And he released his first studio album, Nostalgia 64, while he was still in high school, which is pretty cool. And that, from what I understand, I'm not too familiar with that album, but from what I understand, people really love that album. Like, people hold that album pretty highly, which is pretty crazy to think of from just like a high schooler who's just kind of essentially doing it for fun. But that's his first studio album. It's on a mixtape. His first studio, like, had some money behind it album. It's pretty crazy. And then after that, he would go on to release a dual EP. It's called a dual EP. I guess it's just an LP at that point, or it's just a combination of 2 EPs, but whatever. It's called 32 Zell / Planet Shrooms. And then another studio album, Imperial, and that was before releasing Taboo in, I think, July of 2018. To be honest, I was way, way, way too uneducated in music to to appreciate his earlier works. I appreciate them more now, but especially Imperial, but like at the time that they came out, I didn't pay them any mind, especially, surrounding the whole Ultimate thing. I didn't really think that he would produce music that I would like. And especially when this album came out, I was pretty reluctant to listen to it, just because, like I said, it's from, this is an album by Denzel Curry, the guy from the meme. To me, that was my impression of him. It's the guy from the meme. I didn't know that, he would end up making one of my favorite albums ever. And yeah, if you're not familiar with Denzel's rapping style, which, especially at that time, it was insanely high energy. He still is insanely high energy, insanely dark in tone, and it honestly, in a way, it sounds like the love child of metal and rap as a genre. That's what it sounds like to me. It's just, and I really just mean that just kind of by like the higher energy that Denzel has. The way he uses his voice in that way, that's more metal than the actual instrumentals. No, that's all rap. But, I digress. And it's a good thing that I gave this thing a chance, because this album to me is a future classic, if not a classic already. The reason that I'm saying a future classic is because it only came out, about 2 years ago. So that's I mean, people call albums that came out that night classics. I don't necessarily like to do that. I'll do that as a joke sometimes, but I don't necessarily like to make a habit of doing that, because it's just kind of like you have to let an album breathe first before you can just kind of call it a classic. But this album to me is definitively, at this point, 2 years later, a future classic. To me, it's as close to perfect as a rap album could be. Rap albums to me are really hard to nail, especially ones that are like a normal album length. And I think this is this is as close to a perfect rap album could be to me. And a lot of that honestly has to do with the story that it tells, the overall energy that it gives off, and the concept of the album in its entirety. And this concept was obviously done on purpose, but it was also advertised. It's done on purpose, and you can tell that because it was advertised as a concept album during its release. The album as a whole contains 13 songs and is 43 minutes long, which, if you guys are, frequent listeners of this podcast, you know that is my sweet spot right there. 13 songs, 40 some minutes, perfect length. So it gets a lot of points for me in that aspect. The album, so that's the album as just kind of like, as a whole, just as like, just put out, that's how it is as a whole. But as a piece of art, as it is, it was able to take advantage of streaming platforms and how streaming works, and how, the technology of streaming works. By what they did was they actually split the album for release into 3 parts / chapters. I'm going to be referring to them as chapters throughout this episode, but 3 parts, chapters, sides, whatever you want to call them. But each chapter, the first chapter is light, gray, and then dark. So they're sequenced in that way. And then they released the chapter each day for 3 days. And then on the 3rd day, obviously, it was the full album. So it was released as the quote-unquote full album. So like if you go into Spotify right now and you click on the album Taboo, it's technically even split into 3 different CDs, which I thought is really cool. I think it's really important to highlight that in this discussion, or at least in the context of this episode and in the context of this podcast, because it really shows how much Denzel and his team believed in the concept of the album and how heavily the concept fed into the album, and more so that they had the creative capacity to actually release it in this way. Obviously this wasn't the single most, I guess, artsy thing that an artist could do to promote an album. I'm sure there are much more artsy things you could do, or more creative things you could do, but like, what other album do you know that is structured to be a complete full album, get released in 3 parts, and actually pull out successfully, have it actually make sense, and have it done cleanly? I've never seen it before personally, but I think that it's unique in that aspect, and it deserves points for that. And due to the nature of how this album is set up, I'm going to be briefly going over each song in each chapter, just to kind of explain how it fits the narrative of the chapter, as well as I'll give my personal opinion on that song. I'll try to be as concise as I can, as to not bore you guys, but I am warning you, I will ramble for some of my favorite songs. I'm going to try my absolute best not to, and I have my notes, so hopefully I'm going to stick to my notes and not just kind of ramble on afterwards. But anyway, let's get into it. Actually, quick note before we get into the analysis and before we get into the songs. Some of the story elements, or some of the elements of the songs in each chapter that I'll be talking about, will be from some like forums and other like music discussion sources, some of which Denzel himself has commented on. So I do this especially for this album, because I do, like, it's good to listen actively to music, especially that's very content focused. But it's still easy to miss something. So I wanted to make sure that for this episode I actually didn't miss a lot of things with like what Denzel is talking about in the song. So I did refer to some other resources when putting together my script for this. But anyway, with that being said, let's go. And again, we're starting off with the light chapter, light side, and this this chapter is otherwise known to me as "Why is Denzel Curry not yelling at me?" This is the not so dark but still dark part of Denzel's mind, or I guess his struggles, or his mind state, whatever you want to call it. Again, like, obviously it's called this is referred to as the light part of the album, but it is still dark. There are some aspects that are still dark. Even in the first line of the first song being called Taboo, the first line of the song and the first line of the entire album, the first line is literally "Welcome to the darker side of Taboo," which, if taken literally, can and could be confusing, considering we're, like I said, in the light chapter of the album. But it's really just Denzel saying that even the lighter signs of his mind are still dark. And off first listen, it's kind of confusing. Like, at least off my first listen, it was kind of confusing. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. You could also think of this as being, like a cyclic album in a way, where after the last song where he ends up being at his darkest, it all just resets. And then, so the song in a way could also be, there are different ways to interpret music, to interpret this song specifically. And that's, there are a few. There are a few different ways to interpret it. I choose to interpret it as, this is him saying, this is the dark side of my mind. Even though it's light, it's still darker than most people's. Excuse me. The song itself speaks about a relationship with this woman who had been molested at a young age, and how that event makes her very emotionally closed off. And yeah, exactly. It's not a very bright topic to start off your album with, but that's kind of the point. This off rip, what kind of journey you're in for it when you listen to this album. It's gonna be dark. It's gonna be controversial at times, but this is what you're here for. I also read that this song is essentially Denzel talking to himself. So that's a different. I actually, when I was making the script, that's the first time I've ever seen that. I didn't want to call it theory because the forum that I saw it on, they actually used something that Denzel said himself for that conclusion. And with that lens, it's that's pretty interesting. If you listen to the song and you look at the lyrics, it's a pretty interesting. It just makes the song complete. It just flips the song on its head if you look at it through the lens of him talking to himself. But yeah, use that information as you please. For my opinion on the song, this song, for all intents and purposes, is hauntingly. I'm gonna sound kind of corny for saying this, but it genuinely does sound hauntingly beautiful. Obviously, the content is very deep and very dark, and every part of the song reflects that. Which, I mean, you got to give credit to. It's great in that aspect. It almost sounds like you're in a dream that's just kind of slowly turning into a nightmare, if you know what I'm talking about. Like, the dream doesn't seem too bad, and all of a sudden just like something switches and you're like, oh, this is the nightmare. And again, this was not a Denzel that I was expected to hear, being just kind of like talking about a topic so serious and so, emotionally triggering and all this stuff. I didn't expect to hear that. I didn't expect him to sing on this. I didn't expect him to be singing. He spends pretty much more time on this song singing than he does rapping, and it sounds good. That's even the weirder part. Like, if you were for me, just kind of in my head, I'm like, all right, this guy is gonna just scream into my ear for this whole album. Not even close. First song is him singing to me and rapping, both up there, both pretty good in quality, and it's a great way to start off the album. It's not one of my. It's probably like in the mid-range to higher mid-range of songs to me, in my personal opinion on this album. But I mean, every song on this album is good or great or better. So if for some reason I say that I'm not a big fan of one of these songs, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not as good compared to the other songs that's around. They're all good. Moving on to the next song, being called Black Balloons. The content of this song. This song is the metaphorical black balloon that the song is named after represents the pain and dark thoughts that manifest inside Denzel Curry. And how both those thoughts or him or anything could just disappear with a single pop, like a balloon. That's essentially the overarching metaphor of this song. My personal opinion, this is one of my favorite Denzel flows, or the song has one of my favorite Denzel flows, overt symbolism, It has a super catchy chorus, like really catchy chorus, and a really good Goldlink feature, which kind of surprised me. Again, I'm not the biggest Goldlink fan. I'm not sure if I mentioned that yet on this podcast before, but I'm not the biggest Goldlink fan. But this is a really good Goldlink feature, and his voice actually sounds perfect for this song. It sounds like he was made for this song. Yeah, this song is fantastic. This song is really good. Again, I'm trying to keep it short. I'm not trying to ramble. But moving on to the next song is called Cash Maniac. And as you could probably tell from the title of the song, it's, the song is primarily about how the fame and fortune, both in the past, when he wasn't, like a mainstream rapper, and, in the present, when he is a mainstream rapper, is trying to corrupt his mental state. At one point, it was, the one thing that he cared about and pursued the most. There are also some substance abuse there is also some substance abuse content, sprinkled in here and there, but, that's just to cover all the bases. My personal opinion on this song, I don't know how to pronounce the girl's name that is featured on here. I think it's Nigeria, Nyyyjerya, and her singing "Bread So Long, About to Buy the Whole Mall" is like just imprinted onto my brain. I can just hear it perfectly as I'm just thinking about it right now. The chorus, and she sings the chorus, and it's spectacular. The chorus on this song is one of my favorite parts of the album, just as like a very isolated section. It sounded very cool to me from the beginning, like from the first time I listened to it, and it's one of my favorite parts of this album. Also, Denzel's money/drug talk on here is just different. It's descriptive, it's easy to understand, and it's just kind of funny at times. One thing about Denzel Curry, which I might talk about him as an artist, as a person on the separate podcast, just because I like him so much and he's so multifaceted. He just seems like he's just here to have fun, which is all, like I've talked about before, is just something that I really attach to as a music consumer. If you sound like you're having fun on a song, I'm gonna have more fun listening to it, and I'm gonna like it more. So, and he puts every ounce of like fun and energy and emotion into all of his music, so it's very easy for me to get attached to it. And he does this by just kind of, in a lot of ways, just by throwing just like funny little lines in his like very serious songs every once in a while. Even like his more serious gangster, if you will, rhymes and lines are funny every once in a while. Also, this song has one of my favorite song outros, period. Like in any song that I've ever heard. It's glitchy. I keep using the word triumphant. I don't want to use that word, but I don't know what other word to use that's better. But it is. It's somewhat triumphant, and it has the perfect drum pattern on it. Sign me up for it every single time. One of my favorite song outros. And I don't mean, outros to an album, outros to a section, whatever. I mean like the instrumental that plays at the end of the song, to me, is perfect, is absolute perfection. This is probably one of my favorite songs, but this is probably one of my favorite songs on this chapter, or in this chapter. However, my absolute favorite song is Sumo, which is the next song. Sumo is basically, in terms of content, is basically the same as Cash Maniac, in terms of the content being about money. But the song is noticeably more aggressive, which, is purposely done so it can so it can transition into the Great Chapter, which is next. And my opinion on Sumo is, this is less of an opinion, more of like a fact, but it is just bass everywhere. This is the return of the energetic, borderline screaming Denzel that I've come to love now in 2020. And it came later than I expected off the first listen, but the wait was worth it. The song is an absolute clink on flow, aggressive delivery, my god. Creative rhyming and pop culture referencing all tied into one hard-hitting banger of a song. It's fantastic. It's I don't want to say it's one of my favorite songs that I've listened to, period, but it's up there in my ever-growing list of favorite songs that I've listened to. There's a part in this there's a part in this song where Denzel Curry managed to fit a Chowder reference, like Chowder from like Cartoon Network Chowder, a Chowder reference, a quotable lyric, a classic lyric, and by classic lyric I mean like a lyric that someone said. I'm pretty sure it's a Jay-Z lyric. I could be wrong on that. And excuse me. A Chowder reference, a quotable lyric, a classic lyric, and a perfectly timed bass hit in like 10 seconds. All of that. He hit that's really every bass. That's all 4 basses you need to give me on a good song, and he gave it to me in 10 seconds. So, and I was thoroughly impressed by that. Also, bars everywhere. Like, just bar on bar on bar on bar everywhere in this song. It's fantastic. So Sumo leads us straight into the Gray section, which I deem as the Denzel is underrated section of this album. This is the part of the album where I think Denzel best shows off his song-making talents, including his songwriting, delivery, and just straight up just rapping ability. Just anything that you can, and he's a rapper's rapper in some ways, in a lot of ways. This is where every time you guys see me tweet Denzel Curry is underrated, this section of 5 songs is where that opinion comes from, for the most part. The first song on it is called Super Saiyan Superman, and it's pretty much, well, on the song you'll notice it's noticeably darker in sound especially at this point in the album, as we switch from the light side to the dark side, or to the gray side, excuse me. This is kind of a normal rap song in terms of content. I mean, sex, seemingly random bars, just kind of thrown to just make shit rhyme, etc. It's kind of like that to me. That's what it sounds like to me. I didn't really get too much like substance out of like the actual lyrics, personally. It is, however, Denzel referencing himself or comparing himself to like a legend such as Super Saiyan from Dragon Ball Z or Superman. Or more specifically, a legend with this great power, which in and of itself does have a good bit of substance, because, at this point, this gray side is, he's starting to get more accustomed to the fame, and all these people speaking highly of him, and his idols are jumping on music with him, and all this other stuff. So, in that aspect, this does kind of lean out of, like, the lighter, dealing with bad parts, we're getting into slightly better parts, but there's still like there's still this dark aspect to this kind of egotistical, self-centered mentality that he has at this point, thinking of himself as this living legend. This is probably my least favorite song on the album, based purely off of the fact that it gets destroyed by every other song in this chapter, and gets pretty well handled by most of the other songs on the album. The single verse that he has on this song is full of some of the funniest lines I've ever heard in a rap song, however, so I gotta give a point to that. And again, like, it's still a really, really, really good song. It's just compared to some of the other songs in here, it doesn't hit for me personally that much. Yeah, it's a good song, just not to the exact same tier as some of the better songs, some of like the best songs in here, which I can't knock it for, but whatever. Next song in here is called Switch It Up. And one thing that I will say that Denzel does incredibly well is vocal inflections. I'm not talking like, it's kind of like the opposite of like Young Thug vocal inflections, because like Young Thug, he'll make his voice pitch his voice up like really high when he sings and raps. Denzel can pitch his voice absurdly low when he raps, and he uses them perfectly on the song as a way to kind of demonstrate and personify this sort of bipolar disorder, as well as paranoia that he's trying to give off, or that's kind of like the theme of the song, is this kind of bipolar disorder that he's going through, and the paranoia, and that paranoia is related to like friends, money, trust, etc. Famous people paranoia. Personally, this chorus is just downright addicting. A1 chorus, perfectly written, perfectly delivered, perfect. The verses are theatrical and have some of the coolest flow switches I've ever heard. Really great way to discuss topics that aren't really necessarily new to rap. It's just a well-made song. It shows out. Not a lot of people do like really good vocal inflections, especially in rap. And I like how he used his vocal inflections and his voice changes and his flow changes. I like how the song is about, flipping between like two sides of yourself, and literally every part of the song replicates that. His voice changes, the content changes, vice versa. It's fantastic. It's just insanely well made. Next song is Mad I Got It, which is, as you might be able to tell from the title, is all about jealousy. He notices, rich people jealousy, celebrity jealousy. He notices his friends only hang out with him for the money, women only want him for the fame, etc. That kind of stuff, celebrity struggles. Listen, my opinion, it's funny because, like I said, this album's been out for 2 years, and every time I listen to this album, I have a new appreciation for a different song. The first, I don't know, maybe like year, I loved the same 3 songs, and then like every time I listened to it after that in full, I liked it. I essentially substituted like a favorite song from the album. This is one of the ones that got subbed in. Absolutely iconic beat switch to me. In years, I don't think this album got enough plays for it to be like actually an iconic beat switch, but to me, this is an iconic beat switch. It switches up the whole perspective of a song, where the verse / the song ends with Denzel sticking up a person because they don't have the fame or the fortune that he has. They have an honest lifestyle that he wants, and I think it makes for a really cool perspective change. It's just like really cool. Like the whole song, he's rapping through the lens of like all these people that are trying to get close to him because he has the fame and the money and all this stuff, and they're jealous that he has all these things. Like, they're mad that he has it all for him to, in this story, assault this person because, or stick up this person, be jealous of this person because they don't have the fame and the fortune. I just think it's a really cool like theme in the song. I think it's a really cool story that he told within like the 3.5 minutes or whatever that he's rapping on it. But objectively, this is probably the best song on the album, and technically it's the middle song. So you could take this as like the switch. This is if you're familiar with like Frank Ocean, this is the what song is in the middle? It's not. I'm not going to make that reference or my friend's going to get mad at me, so I'm just going to abandon it right there before I mess it up completely. But, it's just a really, really, really objectively good song. And it's easily one of my favorites. Easily one of my favorites on this album. In terms of just, like, listenability, it's fantastic. Next song I have on here next song on the album is called Sirens. And, every once in a while I talk about political rap songs. And if you want a really good political rap song that doesn't actually sound that much like a political rap song, and it touches, on the struggles that America was seeing in 2018, or was starting to see more or ramp up in 2018, this is the song for that. I mean, police brutality, gun violence, terrorism, racism, it's all there from both Denzel and my homie JID, who you guys are probably already tired of me talking about, even though I still have not talked about a full JID project yet, but we'll get to that. In this song, the sirens represent the justice system in America, which is so hauntingly delivered by, and it's the chorus. The chorus is all about sirens. You'll understand what I'm saying if you go out and listen to the song. But the chorus is hauntingly beautiful. There it is again. Hauntingly beautifully delivered by Billie Eilish. I was writing my notes for this, and that blew my goddamn mind that Billie Eilish was on this chorus. She just has vocals. Well, technically, because it's the chorus is Denzel and Billie Eilish both singing the chorus, but it's really her vocals are really just kind of like background. So she's not actually credited on as a full feature on Spotify, and I believe not on Apple Music or anywhere else. But that just blew my goddamn mind. It's like, I see you guys. I'm telling you, she's an industry plant, man. I mean, she's great. Y'all know that I think she's great, but this early 2018, she was doing well in 2018. Don't get me wrong. Like, she was popular in 2018, but like, popular enough for her to get put on a Denzel Curry album, who also wasn't that popular. I mean, I guess they're just, underground connections, like, quote unquote underground connections at that point. But I just thought it was a cool little Easter egg for me personally that, Billie, after these 2 years, I am now knowing that Billie Eilish is on the chorus of one of my favorite songs, one of my favorite albums. I think it's just kind of cool. And, like I just said, my opinion, this is one of my personal favorites on the album, even though I have a small gripe, and it's really not a gripe at all. It's really just me wanting more from an artist, and I need to stop doing shit like that. But, I just wish I got a little bit more from JID in his verse. He didn't actually need to do any more. I just kind of wanted more, if that makes sense. I always want more. His verse was absolutely great, but there's only so much you can do with, like, a quote unquote, I don't want to call this a political song because that might kind of dispel people from going and listening to this, and it's really not. I mean, it is, but it doesn't. It's a good song before it is a political song, if that makes sense. And I have to give credit to the immense amount of emotion that Denzel, JID, and Billie Eilish all give to this song in both their verses and how they actually delivered their verses. It's spectacular. At the end, Denzel's basically just kind of like almost crying through his rapping. That's what it sounds like. It just sounds really cool to me. I think you can tell that they put a lot of emotion into writing the song and then performing the song, which I have to give a lot of points for. Excuse me. Next song is called Clout Cobain. This is the last song in the Grey chapter, and this was, I believe, the first single. I think it's also the only single to have a music video, which is really creepy, by the way. If you don't like clowns, don't watch that music video. Actually, the way the album cover, the way he looks in the album cover is how he looks in the music for this song, but I digress. Clout Cobain, if you kind of catch the reference, which I hope most of you guys would catch the reference, this song is all about suicide and depression from the pursuit of fame, and, that takes the spotlight in this song, and, Denzel performs the song as a parallel to, or he at least structures the song, and the content of the song is meant to parallel the life of Kurt Cobain in that aspect. It's really dark in tone and sound, and of course it leads to the dark. Like I said, this is the last song of the Grey chapter, so it leads directly into the dark chapter of the album. This song, what I will say about my own personal opinion on the song is that it has grown a lot on me since I first heard it 2 years ago, both with how it sounds and how I connect with it, like, personally, with my own experiences. It's not, the most fun song to listen to content-wise, but it isn't, as with every song on here, it's incredibly well made. This song, along with Super Saiyan Superman, are two of my least favorite songs in the album. Just not enough in it for me to just adore it, especially compared to the masterpiece that is this last section, this last chapter of the album, which is the dark chapter, Dark Side, whatever, and otherwise known as Denzel, Why Are You Yelling at Me? The Denzel, Why Are You Now Yelling at Me chapter. These songs make me want to punch a hole in the wall and set my bookshelf on fire, but like in a good way. If that makes sense. I'm smiling when I'm doing it, maniacally, but I'm smiling. The songs, and as you listen through, and I've tried to articulate, as you move through this album as a whole, the songs just progressively get harder, darker, and way more aggressive as they go. So, just keep that in mind as you're listening. When you're listening to Sumo, you're like, oh, this is pretty hard. It's like, nah, it goes a lot harder. Trust me. And that leads us into the first song on the Dark Side, which is The Blackest Balloon. And, this kind of refers similarly to Black Balloons from the Light Side. But this song is just downright creepy. It sounds like a haunted house level in a video game in a way, to me, at least. The stripped down instrumental with some cool effects here and there, paired with Denzel's delivery, is something out of a horror movie that he mentioned, the horror movie that he mentions in the song itself. This song deals with some really dark aspects of Denzel's past life and present situations that he also sees other people going through. My personal opinion on this song, I love this song for how perfectly it sets up the rest of the album, like the following 3 songs. On its own, I'm not the biggest fan of it. This song, along with Super Saiyan Superman and Cloud Cobain, are 3 like, if I had to, those are my 3 least favorite. Again, none of them are bad. I feel the need to articulate that none of them are bad by any means, but they're just like, in isolation, they're not that great they're not that enjoyable for me to listen to in isolation. But in terms of the context of this album, it's perfect. Everything he talks about here is negative. Even the good things, the quote-unquote good things he mentions, are said in a way that he's kind of just disappointing you for, like, thinking that they're good things. It's creepy and suggestive, and a solid chapter intro. So I'll give it credit for that. Next song is called Perks, and if you really just can't figure it out at this point, it's about drugs and addiction. More so about how these drugs and all these substances are affecting and run their way through people in the music industry, not necessarily with Denzel himself. He even says in the song multiple times in the chorus, "I do not fuck with the perks, I barely fuck with the earth." And he also takes some, which is my favorite part of this song, he also takes some like light shots at the mumble rappers who are taking over the music scene with their music that promotes, the same drug and substance abuse, which he is also, commenting on. This song is pretty damn hard, if you ask me. There are some awesome lyrics to scream out if we ever go to concerts again, which I doubt. I did go to one Denzel concert, and I think he did play this. I feel like I have the video of it on my phone still. I do remember screaming out the lyrics to this shit. So that is a valid take on that. Again, this is one of my favorites on this album, and it's aggressive, it's funny as shit, and it's fun as hell to blast in the car. Next song is called Vengeance, featuring JPEG Mafia and Zillakami. This song is, keep in mind, we're getting darker here. This song is all about the 3 rappers releasing all of their anger and extremely, extremely violent thoughts, very violent thoughts, towards their enemies. I mean, murder, robbery, kidnapping. It's all there. There's like some other stuff in there. It's all there in spades. It's dark. It's the content of it's dark. The material is pretty dark. It does, however, finish with this kind of pretty instrumental at the end of the song, which insinuates that them releasing all this bad energy and just kind of like letting it out into the universe just kind of is kind of therapeutic for them, and it makes them feel better just to not actually do these things, but to just kind of let go of all these negative emotions. This is one of the hardest songs I've ever heard in my life, like point blank period. JPEG's verse is cutthroat as hell, as a lot of JPEG's verses are. Zillakami's voice is downright terrifying. His voice is so scary to me. It's great. I love it, but it's terrifying. This is one of my favorite songs of all time. Put it on the list. It's on the list. And finishing off with the last song on the album called "The Black Metal Terrorist." And you're gonna be, like I said, you're gonna be 12 songs in. You're gonna be on the last song. You just finished Vengeance. You're like, wow, that was an experience. I don't think Nick. I heard you saying that it just keeps getting darker, but it can't get much darker than that. And my answer to that is, it does. It does. It really does. Dude's talking like fuck everyone, murdering everyone, dropping bombs. There's also like a that dropping bombs line is great, but it's a little special. Just check it out. There's some torture in there. I sound way too happy talking about torture, but I just love this song. All that over a song that is almost, that this song especially, you'll know what I'm talking about when I originally said that he is an artist, and some of the music that he makes in some ways is almost more metal than rap. This song will blow out your speakers and make people think that you're about to shoot up a shopping center. Sorry if that offends people. That little joke offends people, but whatever. And that kind of bleeds into my opinion of this song, where, I mean, the contents of the song are a little dark for my taste, just kind of, again, in isolation. But I do have to admit that screaming out "I am the black metal terrorist" while all hell breaks loose on the instrumental in this song is kind of therapeutic for me. I'm not gonna lie. I did it every single time I listened to the song while I was writing the script. And there you have it. That's really, again, like, I try to keep it, pretty short in here just not to bore you guys. That's a pretty service level rundown of one of my favorite albums, and in my opinion, one of the better to best rap albums to come out in a few years. Again, in my opinion, I cannot recommend this album enough despite its more, I'll say, aggressive themes. It's genuinely just, a very well-made, piece of music that's put together in a way that actually makes you feel like you listen to one story or just one train of thought or just one progression of thought as you listen through a whole album in its entirety, which I cannot commend enough. I definitely plan on talking about Denzel Curry more, in the future, as I think he's still criminally underrated in the music world, and of course, we'll look forward to talking more about him in the future with you guys. And as with every Thursday, I'll finish off by quickly going over the music that I am looking forward to releasing tonight, starting off with this new The Weeknd Calvin Harris single. It's a little late in the summer for Calvin Harris to release summer music, but, I mean, okay, I'm always down for some Calvin. You might not know, I haven't think I've mentioned Calvin Harris on this podcast yet, but I'm always down for the Weeknd music, trust me. And Calvin Harris, I saw a tweet that said Calvin Harris, after they announced this, that Calvin Harris always has a summer bop in the tuck. And that's pretty true. Calvin Harris does always have a summer bop in the tuck. So I'm looking forward to that, even though it's getting cooler out slowly. There's also a new Ty Dolla $ign single featuring Nicki Minaj that's supposed to be coming out tonight. And thank God we are finally in Ty Dolla $ign rollout mode. I want this Ty Dolla $ign album so bad. We've gotten 2 singles from him in the last month and a half, 2 months, which is, all signs pointing towards a album release soon. Looking forward to that. There's I shouldn't say new, but there's a Brent Faiyaz deluxe album coming out. The original Brent Faiyaz album, I forget the name of the album off the top of my head now, but it came out in the spring/winter, if I remember correctly. And then there is a Dua Lipa Future Nostalgia Club remix album, which I heard a little teaser on our Instagram, and I might have to come in here on Monday and walk back my opinion on the remix that she did of Levitating with Madonna and Missy Elliott that I talked about on, technically Tuesday last week. I might have to walk back that opinion after I listen to this album, but we'll see. I'm holding my reservations until I listen to it in full. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in today. I have been Nick Hope. This has been the Bittersweet Taste Podcast, and I will talk to you guys again on Monday.